Welcome students to the series of lecture on fixed income. And in this series of lecture on fixed income, we are in discussion of duration from the last 2-3 sessions. And till now, we have covered the interpretation number one of duration, that is on an average percentage change in the bond price due to 1% change in interest rate. We understood that duration formula is P2 minus P1 upon 2P0 del Y or del I, del Y or del I that represents change in interest rate into 100. We derived it with our own hands from scratch. And the last is the issue with the duration, that it does not do a good job in predicting the bond price for large change in interest rate. We have discussed this so far. And today we are introducing one important interpretation other than this interpretation, which revolves around the sensitivity of the bond price with respect to interest rate, that is duration. So, what is the interpretation that we want to discuss today? We are going to introduce another interpretation of duration, and that is slope of the price yield curve. And that is the discussion of the session. That duration is nothing else but the slope of the price yield curve. But how? Okay, before talking about whether duration is the slope of the price yield curve or not, let's recap what is the price yield curve. The price yield curve is the curve which represent the different prices of the bond for different interest rate in the market. So assume I will give you a bond which has the face value of 1000, coupon 6%, frequency annual, maturity 3 years, and I want to know what would be the bond price for different interest rate. If you plot all the prices of the bond for different interest rate, 0%, 1%, 2%, 3%, till 50%, you will get a curve, not a straight line. You will get a curve. And definitely this curve is highlighting the inverse relationship between price and interest rate. That's awesome. But it is a curve. It's not a straight line. And for that, if you don't remember, we also try to represent this on Python notebook. Now I'm saying this in this price yield curve. Duration is a slope at a given interest rate. So for 4%, I calculate the duration. That duration represent the slope on this curve for 4% interest rate. That is what is duration. It is the slope on the price yield curve for a specific interest rate. If the interest rate is 7%, in the last session, we calculated the duration at interest rate of 7%, and that came to 2.646. It means at 7% interest rate, if you go back to this price yield curve, and you try to find out what would be the value of the bond at 7%, maybe this one, and plot a tangent or a slope, that is the duration. How come? How come? So for that, let's first understand what is the slope. Do you remember slope from your class 9th, 10th or school days? You might have discussed slope in the equation of a line y is equal to mx plus c, where m was the slope. What was the formula of m? Do you remember? The formula for m was y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, or change in y upon change in x. That was the formula for slope. And if you try to use differentiation, and that is not required, though, if you put down limit delta x tends to 0, then this delta y upon delta x will become dy by dx, right? In the terms of calculus differentiation, this was the formula of slope. But do we see anything like that? Y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1 in the formula of duration. Do we see that? So let's look into the formula of duration. The formula of duration is P2 minus P1 upon 2P0 del I into 100. 100 is a constant. Don't worry about it. Let's take 1 upon 2P naught constant. These are the constant because P naught will not change. So what I'm saying is What I'm saying is do P2 minus P1, and I'm saying delta I, and I'm taking 1 upon 2 P naught as a separate value. Let's look into P2 minus P1 upon delta I. P2 minus P1, delta is what? The change in interest rate from 6% to 7% or 7% to 8% if you're calculating the duration at 7%. So it would be I2 minus I1. What P2 represent in price yield curve? P2 represent a price on the y-axis and P1 also represent a price on the y-axis. This is your y-axis y2. This is your y-axis y1, y2 minus y1. Upon I2 minus I1, where is interest rate? On the x-axis. So I2 minus I1. So can you see the formula of the slope here? So duration is what? A slope. Now you would say, no, sir, I'm doing division by P naught. That is just to convert it into the percentage term, right? You're just changing something which is absolute into percentage. That's it. But still, the essence of slope has not gone anywhere, right? So it means duration is nothing but the slope at the interest rate at which you're trying to find the duration. That is what the duration is. Okay, let's understand it properly. So basically, at this point, I'm saying if this is my 7%, at 7%, duration represent the slope, which is delta P upon delta I. That is what duration. Delta P upon delta I. Definitely 1 upon 2 P naught is a constant. Keep it separate. That is we are using to convert this delta P upon delta I into percentage. That's it. Okay. When I say slope, do you remember slope is also equal to tan theta? If you're not able to remember slope by y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1, try to remember what was tan theta. Tan theta was perpendicular upon base at a point. Okay, let's do that. So at this point, if this is your theta, if this is your theta, this is your perpendicular, this is your base. What this perpendicular represent? The change in price, P2 minus P1. What this base represent? I2 minus I1. So basically, when you say tan theta is what? P2 minus P1 upon I2 minus I1. That is change in price due to change in interest rate. And that is the definition of duration. It is the sensitivity of the bond price due to change in interest rate. And that's why it is duration. So can I say duration is the slope? Yes, then duration is the slope. Then, okay. Now we have established either with tan theta or with y2 minus y1 upon x2 minus x1 that duration is a slope. I cannot convince you more than this that duration is a slope. If you're convinced, then let's talk about the issue that we discussed in the last session. We discussed the issue that duration does not do a good job in predicting the bond price for large change in interest rate. Why? Because it's the slope of the price yield curve. That's why. How come? Let's see. If you're trying to predict the change in the price or the new price with the help of duration, actually you're trying to predict the new price with the help of this line, which is duration, not with actual price yield curve. What I'm saying? I'm saying that you calculated the duration at 7%. It came to 2.646. It means you're talking about this line. This line represents duration. When I'm asking you to change the interest rate by just 1%, then because of this line, the prediction will be this point or this point. Still, you're not very far from the actual valuation, which is on the price yield curve. On the price yield curve, please understand you have actual prices of the bond respective to a given interest rate. These are actual prices. These are not predicted by duration or any other thing on the planet. Actual prices came out of the discounting of the cash flow with the interest rate or BA2 plus calculator. These are actual prices. So for small change in interest rate, the duration line is saying this is the value, but the actual value is this. But for large change in interest rate, say the interest rate changes by 8%, the duration will say this is the price, this is the new price based on duration, but the actual price is this. See the difference? This is the price for 11% interest rate. This is the price, say this point as A, which is being predicted with the help of duration. And this is the actual valuation, say point B. See the difference. The difference will increase as you increase the interest rate change. The difference will decrease as you decrease the interest rate change from the point where you calculated the duration. So for the very small change in interest rate, see, for a very small change in interest rate, what duration is predicting is very near to the price yield curve. But for large change in interest rate, what duration is predicting through a line and through the price yield curve is very different. Is very different. And that's why there is issue in duration, because duration is actually the slope of the price yield curve. Okay. So with that, we have understood one most important stuff, that duration doesn't have one interpretation. In this session, we introduced another interpretation of duration. The first interpretation of duration was it is on an average percentage change in the bond price due to 1% change in interest rate. This was interpretation number one. The interpretation number two of duration, it is the slope of the price yield curve. And we'll also discuss third interpretation of duration. Okay? Maybe in the next session or next to next session. With that, I will pause, but very important information or very important advice. I understand I'm making very small videos to help you understand that you can also capable of understanding the complex topic of finance, complex evaluation topic, complex statistical topic. But these small videos are just to help you to prepare for your examination or help you build the concept. If you really want or truly want to prepare for FRM or CFA, I encourage you all to enroll in the SOFR FRM program. Yes, it is a paid one, but it has a reason. That's why it is a paid one. Okay? It's not an advertisement. But if you really want to save your time, if you really want to prepare for your examination diligently, then do enroll there and it will help you and it will guarantee your success in the examination. However, I will keep on helping you with these small videos. That's fine. But with that, thank you. Have a nice day.